By the power of Grayskull. Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome to the 2021 Masters of the Universe Masterverse Rundown. It's morphin' time! So this year's video is for a brand new line, Masters of the Universe Masterverse. Recently, Mattel decided to take the Masters of the Universe brand back under their own wings and produce new toy lines. There have been multiple lines since that acquiring starting last year. One of those lines happens to be Masters of the Universe Origins, which I've been really enjoying, but I feel like in terms of a video format, I don't have too much to say on the individual figure. Most of them are based on the main base He-Man body, and they're all pretty good at what they do. So I was trying to, do some Masters of the Universe stuff on this channel, and, well, Origins I just don't have that much to talk about. And in terms of other lines, the line based on the Kids He-Man show for Netflix has been sporadic for availability. But those two are lacking something that I was looking for specifically, which was larger, more articulated, more accessory, collector's type figures, and that's where Masterverse comes in. As you may know from the background behind me, I did heavily collect classics. But for me, I came into classics a little late. I didn't start collecting the line till probably like 2012. I didn't even sign up for the subscription till like 2013. So as you can imagine, I missed out on a lot of major characters. I never got Beastman. I never got Trapjaw or Triclops. So that's where I kind of got, attracted to collecting Origins, and I've really enjoyed that. However, I was always looking for something a little more. And what Masterverse has provided is a new line that follows a different path. It's not classics reinvented, but it has a similar idea. It's taking a bunch of designs and a bunch of characters and putting them in a similar style. The thing I really love about it is the fact they've upped the articulation to include double jointed elbows and knees, and we'll be talking about that soon. Now, most of these figures are directly based on the Masters of the Universe Revelation series on Netflix, which is actually a good basis to start with because that way we got some different designs. While they could have gone and done the initial classic designs like they did with Origins, would you want to have a Beastman in Origins at the same time as a Beastman in Masterverse that look the same? Well, instead we got the Beastman from post-time skip in Revelation, so he has a completely different look. Now, that's not going to be a thing for everybody. Most people will want the classic looks, I think, for the most part, but whoever is looking for different versions of characters, this might be the line for you. I've also noticed that not many people talk about Masterverse in comparison to Origins, simply because it doesn't have that classic feel. It's trying something a little different, and that's mostly why I wanted to do this video. So we're going to be going over all of the 2021 releases for Masterverse, all the deluxe figures, the exclusives, all three waves that came out. We're not including Savage He-Man and Orko because that came out just barely at Big Bad Toy Store, stocked it like the last week of December. Mine's sitting in my pile of loot. It didn't make it out to other stores, so I don't count it as a 2021 release, and we'll talk about it in next year's video, assuming this video does well. So if you enjoy me talking about Masters of the Universe, please leave a like and let me know in the comments because I'd like to keep doing more about this franchise. So in terms of Masterverse, all these figures retail for $19.99 US unless they're a different scale. So for example, Skelegod and Faker were $29.99 and then Battle Cat was $39.99 just due to their different sizes and accessory counts. So let's take a look. We're going to look at size, we'll look at scale, we'll look at articulation, discuss some of the problems the figures have, and then run through each figure individually, taking a look at all of them. So, without further ado, let's begin. So first things first, let's talk about scale. This line roughly stands about 7 inches tall, so as you can see, they're a little bit taller than Masters of the Universe Classics, seen on the left, which was the predominant collector He-Man line for many years. Also, we have Origins to the left and the Netflix He-Man to the right, which are the current 5.5-inch line, so Masterverse is towering over all of them. Also, Masterverse is towering over Hasbro's Marvel Legends line, which is the standard 6-inch line out there on the market. So before we get started properly, I did want to talk about the figures themselves in the tangible sense. I don't usually do this during rundowns, but I feel like it's very important for these. Now, this is a newer line. Mattel hasn't really done the highly articulated figures that long. I think they do it with some of their WWE lines. But with He-Man, this is the most articulation we've had put into a figure. And because of that, there's some weirdness, and I want to go over that talking, you know, person to person or person to camera to person, but just to kind of give you an idea how these feel. So a lot of the plastic on this feels really sturdy, but sometimes a little too sturdy. So like you can see the waist swivel takes a bit of force to move. The ball joint up here mostly just does this. It doesn't really turn in addition to that. Shoulders are fairly movable. And this is a, you know, I've had He-Man for a few months now, so this is, you know, moving his articulation. Feels pretty good. Overall, pretty solid. The things that worry me is the wrists. So the wrists, they're supposed to pivot. And you can see that, like, I can get He-Man's wrist to pivot there with a lot of work, a lot of force. And when you got these kind of wrists, so let's look at the joints here. So they're these little pegs, and on these little pegs, you have a hinge, and they plug in here, like that. And yeah, I mean, it works for the most part. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't always work. So with Spikor here, his hands were not really big enough for his weapon, and I wasn't really paying enough attention, and I was just trying to push the weapon into the hand, specifically this hand, and the peg snapped off, and I had to dig it out of there, which is why his wrist is all scraped up on the inside. Now, luckily, all these figures have extra hands, but keep in mind that, you know, if you have a hand like this, and the handle is that thick, there, you might want to like heat it up, because this just doesn't, look at this doesn't even flex. So sometimes the plastic's a little too stiff, so keep that in mind. It doesn't happen with every one of them. I mean, that only happened on Spikor, because I mean, I literally just was taking, let's see if I can just pull this out here. I was taking this weapon and just pushing it into the hand, and I pushed too hard and it snapped the wrist joint. So keep that in mind, that they're overall fairly sturdy, but there may be some of those points at the wrist. And I noticed that some of the Wave 3 figures are much better at this than these. But let's talk about the hips, because I think that's been a discussion topic online a lot. The hips are really stiff. As you can see with He-Man here, I've kind of, you know, I've had him for a while. His loosened up. The way the hips work is that they have these ball sockets on the inside. I'm sorry, we're looking up He-Man's skirt here. They're very tight in there, and it's kind of worrisome. So keep that in mind, that when you're moving the legs, especially forward, try to take some care. Basically, I'm saying take some care. They could get kind of weird. So again, thigh swivel. We've got double knees. These are pinless joints, so they're a little more compressed than if they were pinned. Boot swivel, and then the ankle pivot's also just really tight on these, which is good, because a lot of classics figures I have very loose ankles, so Masterverse having tight ankles is good. But anyways, that's He-Man. I've had him for a bit. Let's do the same thing with Fisto, who I've only had probably about a couple weeks now. His joints are still incredibly tight. Fisto also had a thing where he had extra plastic, so it was preventing his elbow from moving, so I had to carve out a lot of plastic on this guy. You can still kind of see some on this side. There is still a little bit of plastic there, and yeah, it doesn't really want to bend the lower elbow. For some reason, it was just fused, as you can see there, like that. So again, not necessarily every figure. His hips, though, move easier than He-Man's. So I'm hoping that this is just a sign that they fixed some of that. Same with the wrists. The wrists seem to, they're still really stiff on the pivot, but they seem a little sturdier. So hopefully they're working through some of those early day stuff. I mean, the head sculpts are getting much better, which is good, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, so keep that in mind. The hips are probably the hips and the wrists are probably the things I'd be most concerned about. So just take care. Just take some little extra effort, and hopefully nothing goes wrong. I did want to mention packaging. It's kind of strange, weirdly angular, but the packaging artwork is incredibly beautiful, and each box has 2 unique pieces of art on them, which I figured would be really, really awesome. Naturally, this line begins where all lines begin, He-Man himself. Now, this is kind of an interesting figure, because I think most people are kind of turned off by the head sculpt, and I can agree, it's kind of a weird face overall. The body proportions for the line in general are typically lankier than standard He-Man lines. There's less of that muscular bulk and more of a kind of more natural build. Of course, He-Man comes with a Sword of Power, which is much longer and differently designed than we're used to because it is based on the Revelation design. What's kind of fun is you can fit the sword in his back between the harness, which is how he stores it in the series, which is like how you store it on the vintage figure. He also comes with a shield, which he didn't use in Revelation. That's what I was talking about when these are inspired by Revelation, because they're not exact one-to-one. But overall, I really like this He-Man. I think the double jointed articulation actually really makes him a lot more fun than other He-Man figures, and overall, I do have a lot of fun posing this figure around. The natural next step is Skeletor. Skeletor, I think, isn't as solid as He-Man, and I can't really tell you why. But overall, I mean, I don't mind the head sculpt because it is closer to the Revelation look, but yeah, I could do with a different head later on. This one's just not quite there. Accessories-wise, he comes with the shaping staff, which is very prominently featured in Revelation's early episodes, and I'm glad to see it here because that is a thing from the Filmation show brought into action figure form. And naturally, he also comes with the Havoc staff. Sadly, it doesn't open up the top and shoot fireballs like the version does in the show. That would have been a neat feature, but other than that, it looks good. I gotta say, though, that just something about this Skeletor just doesn't hit as well as I think later figures in the line. But he does make a nice companion to He-Man, and they can square off for this, our final battle, no matter how many times that final battle will happen. Next up, we have Evil-Lyn in her post-time skip appearance, and this is a really nice figure. This was kind of the figure that got me into the line, and she turned out really good. I think overall, female characters in Masters of the Universe have not gotten the best toys, so to see Evil-Lyn here in a very nicely proportioned, well-articulated body that doesn't have anything lacking compared to her male counterparts is awesome. I also appreciate the head sculpt. I think the version with the helmet looks the best, but she does come with an alternate head with her long flowing hair, as we saw in the series. Now, it's interesting, she does come with the full staff version of her wand. She also comes with the short version of the wand after Teela cut the staff in half, which fits this look specifically. In addition to that, she also comes with her shoulder bag, which makes a nice combo of accessories together and gives kind of a Evil-Lyn on the road look. Overall, I really love the posability and the range on this figure, and that quite surprised me considering most of my classics Masters women are pretty much just standing stock standard just to stay up. And she makes a good companion to Skeletor. Rounding out Wave 1, we have Mossman. Mossman's pretty cool. He's a completely unique figure for the line, which I'm glad to see. Not everything needs to reuse the He-Man body. And he's got a lot of cool, intricate detailing. I love the head sculpt too. It gives him kind of an action-y pose. And he comes with some pretty cool effect part. Except this effect part is so huge and so gigantic, if it's not resting against the ground, it's likely going to topple the figure. So pretty much I just kind of have him posed, just using his hands. But overall, that's a fairly nice Mossman, even if he doesn't have the flocked effect that previous ones did. Moving into our first deluxe figure, we have Battle Cat. There's always a Battle Cat in a line with a He-Man, it seems, and this one is nothing to slouch at. He is a $40 price point, which makes him a little bit more expensive than the rest of the figures, but he is substantial. He is outclassing both the Classics and the Origins Battle Cat. As you can see here, the Revelation Masterverse one is just impressively huge. Just like previous Battle Cats, you can remove his helmet and harness, but this version of Battle Cat specifically is molded underneath to look like Cringer. I mean, it looks like Cringer on steroids, but that face is definitely Cringer and not just Battle Cat. What's also really impressive too is the range of articulation. I expected the arms and the legs themselves to be articulated, the head, the mouth to open, the standard stuff. It was the body movement where he can actually twist him in different directions, left or right. This allows Cringer to have a really well-posed version of himself, even if he's, gigantic. And you can pose with the armor because the harness does have some wiggle room, but you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. And then lastly, of course, here is He-Man riding on Battle Cat, where Battle Cat just seems gigantic in comparison. This doesn't happen as much in Revelation, so I typically have them separate, but it is an option, and that's pretty nice. The other deluxe figure is Skelegod. He retails, I believe, for $30, so he is more expensive than the standard, but he is a bit larger. He is a really impressively detailed figure, brand new sculpt, and overall just looks impressive. This is Skeletor with the powers of He-Man, and it definitely shows. Now, I did want to mention loose ankles because this one on Skelegod is fine. This one's completely floppy, so depending on the pose, he may just keel over. Naturally, Skelegod does come with the Sword of Power, which is the source of his power, and it's the same piece that came with He-Man. He also comes with a really cool energy blast effect, which clips over one of the hands, and honestly, I kind of like it. Putting Skelegod with Evil-Lyn and the Beastman we'll be looking at soon, they make a nice trio, and it's very cool to have these different kind of designs on these classic characters. Moving out of Wave 1, we're going to go chronologically, and the next up would be the Mattel Creations exclusive Skelegod, probably intended for San Diego Comic-Con 2020. This is a deluxe edition of Skelegod that differs from his retail release version. Let's look at the box, because it's just amazing. You not only have an outer mailer with really nice artwork, you also have the inner box, which has a book-like design. Open it up to have a series of lights flash, including black light, giving Skelegod a nice glow effect. As you can see in the box here, he's actually well posed and well positioned because you can remove the plastic tray, remove the figure without damaging the packaging, and you could put him back at any time. Looking at Skelegod himself, he reuses some parts from other figures, but overall casts a very impressive silhouette. Skelegod is one of those characters I did not have in classics. This one really takes the cake. Either that or the fact he was voiced by Tony Todd, who's one of my favorite actors. You take your pick, but this is probably my favorite Skelegod figure released. In addition to all that awesomeness, the Mattel Creations version specifically comes with a wired cape, allowing him to pose it in really cool ways. Naturally, Skelegod comes with the halberd that his original toy came with, and it looks really nice here. He also comes with an interesting accessory, which is a split power sword that sort of is supposed to replicate the fact the sword got split in Revelation, but it doesn't look the way it does in the show. Both parts combine together and then clip into a handle for Skelegod to wield, so it's kind of a weird accessory. We're getting a more accurate version of the split swords with King Grayskull in 2022, so I'll be looking forward to that. The only downside I think to the Skelegod figure is he doesn't glow entirely or all the bone structure, it's just his head and just the split sword parts. The other deluxe figure is Faker. He was released as a Target exclusive first, but there are listings that seem to indicate he'll be getting released at general retail in 2022. This figure's pretty cool because they went really into the robot aspect of Faker in the design for the show, and they really exemplified that in the sculpt. I love the torn away skin look with the robot parts underneath. He also comes with a bunch of accessories he didn't have in the series necessarily, including the sword and shield. As you can see, while he reuses the legs, pretty much everything from the waist down on He-Man, as well as the weapons, he has a ton of new sculpting on that torso. He also comes with an extra head that is basically just the He-Man head with evil eyes, except it's not the same sculpt as the normal He-Man. It is instead the Faker design without the robot bits. And if you put this on He-Man, you can get Faker posing as He-Man or the evil He-Man vision that Teela fought in Subternia. There also is a full robot head, which removing the chest harness helps with this look. And then in addition to that, he comes with Skeletor's armor recolored orange to replicate the original Faker toy in a way. Overall, it's a very impressive package of accessories, and I quite like this version of Faker. So starting off Wave 2, we have Teela in her post-time skip look. This is a very cool looking figure. I think the design really comes together well, and overall I think was very well portrayed in an action figure form. I especially like the way that the hair is done because it's out of her face, but still prominent in a lot of ways. She does come with her weapon, which in the show changes shape and size, so as the toy there's one version that stores on the back of her waist, another version that's in its sword configuration, a version that's in the staff configuration, and that gives her all three options there, which is pretty cool. Plus, she makes a nice companion to He-Man. They are definitely partners in fighting for good. Next up, we have Man-at-Arms in his classic appearance. And this is a very cool looking Man-at-Arms. It gives me sort of 2000X vibes as well as Revelation vibes, and I really like the way this turned out. He looks like Man-at-Arms, and he looks like that classic design brought into the Masterverse line. Unfortunately, we still don't get any kind of effect part for his wrist laser, which has been a thing that Man-at-Arms has had since the Filmation cartoon in 1982, and I have not seen a single figure actually give him an effect part for that. He also includes the hammer, which was featured on the toy and was featured later on in Revelation, so he's fully decked out how you would expect a Man-at-Arms figure. Plus, he looks really good alongside He-Man. Next, we have Beastman in his post-time skip appearance, which I love this design. It's such a great redesign of Beastman. Gives him a whole different look. Gives him a more of a feral, out-of-control look, and I love the scarring detail, especially on the chest. He naturally comes with his whip, which can store on his belt, and once you have the whip out, it works pretty well for what it is. It's a whip for an action figure. Overall, Beastman looks really fantastic, and I really enjoy posing this figure. He is a bit substantially larger than the base body mold, which I'm really glad to see because it gives him extra bulk, and he makes a good companion to Skeletor and Evil-Lyn. Next up we have Spikor. Now Spikor is just one of those characters that wasn't in Revelation too much in a significant role, but he was there and he was a fairly easy toy to make because he's using the base He-Man body. And overall, he looks good. He looks like Spikor. Naturally, he comes with the spike club that the original toy included, as well as an alternate hand with the spike darts, which we saw on the original toy, as well as I think in some versions of the show, including Revelation. Kicking off Wave 3 is a retail version of Skelegod. I didn't pick this up because I have the Mattel Creations version, but the color of his bone structure is more yellow than green. The head is bone white as opposed to transparent green. The cape does not have a wire, and the halberd is a bit different. It's a little different of a Skelegod, but it's not one that I felt like I needed to repeat in my collection. The next figure in Wave 3 is Andra. Andra is a character that barely appeared in previous Masters material, I think only a couple comic books, so she got completely reinvented for Revelation and was one of my favorite characters from that show. And she turned out as such a great action figure, I'm actually pretty impressed. This is really showing the range that Masterverse can have, because in addition to her great sculpted details, they gave her a blast effect for her wrist laser. That's all I've been asking for with Man-at-Arms, but they gave it to her here, and it looks great. It gives a nice dynamic feel to it. She also includes the helmet she wore in her first appearance when they were fighting Stinkor, and also on top of that comes with the cape, which, you can tie up, and honestly, this cape looks really good. I love that there's a completely different option for a look for a figure included in the same box. In addition to that, she makes a nice companion to Teela. They look like they're ready to take on the world. Next up, we have Fisto. Fisto's another one of those, hey, he was there. Honestly, it's nice to have a new Fisto figure. Never had him in Classics, so getting him here is pretty cool. Overall, it's Fisto. Chest armor thing, head. There's not much else to say, except for the fact that his giant fist hand is made out of die-cast metal, which seems sort of excessive, but kind of amazing. It just added a premium feel to it. And then naturally, he also includes the sword that his original vintage toy came with. Last figure of Wave 3 and last figure of the line for 2021, Stinkor. I was actually pretty surprised by this figure. He's reusing a lot of parts from Beastman, which gives him that larger feel that Beastman had, but changing up the torso so his neck is more naturally aligned. And overall, I think the head sculpt is great. It gives that nice feral skunk look. But there is another option here, which allows him to have the gas mask that he had in his appearance. And I love that idea that his stink was so bad that even he had to wear a mask to keep it in so he wouldn't have to deal with it. And I love the way that looks so much more than the regular head. He also includes his shield, which is not a repaint of the He-Man shield. Surprisingly, it is a different mold, but one that could be reused later on. And yeah, I just really like this Stinkor figure, which is funny because I don't think I even like Stinkor as a character that much, but this figure turned out really cool. And also we can recreate a scene almost with Teela and Andra fighting Stinkor. Kind of just makes me wish that Teela came with a cape and helmet as well. Alright, so there may have only been 16 figures this year, 15 of which I picked up, but I'm still going to do a top 10, which means it was fairly simple to eliminate a few of them. So let's begin. Number 10, Battle Cat. Number 9, He-Man. Number 8, Fisto. Number 7, Beastman. Number 6, Man-at-Arms. Number 5, Evil-Lyn. Number 4, Stinkor. Number 3, Teela. Number 2, Skelegod. Number 1, Andra. Overall, I just found all these figures to be great. I think, He-Man being at the lower end of this is kind of surprising because a lot of these secondary characters and Masters usually get the short end of the stick when it comes to new, exciting figure functions, but this line actually promoted the secondary characters even harder and made them better than the main two, and I really, really appreciate that. I really can't wait to see what this line does in the future. So the first year of Masterverse was pretty solid. There was definitely improvements in the line almost immediately. I'd say Wave 2 is better than Wave 1 and Wave 3 is better than Wave 2. The figures got better in such a short amount of time, which has me very excited to see where it goes in 2022. We know we're going to be getting figures based on concept designs as well as other shows such as She-Ra or the Netflix He-Man. So I'm looking forward to see where this line goes forward, and I hope they don't give up on Revelation because there's a lot of really cool designs from Part 2 that I want to see as figures. So I'm really excited. Overall, I want to know what your thoughts are on this line. I want to know if you want to see me continue to talk about Masters of the Universe, or me being a different kind of Masters fan just turned you off the video completely. Let me know that as well, because I need your feedback. And if you enjoyed it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, because that'll let you know what else I have on this channel. If you're new here to the channel, because it's the first time I've done a Masters of the Universe specific video, go check out some of my other videos on the channel. I talk about DVDs and Blu-rays, movies, and of course, toys of all kinds of varieties. So I'd appreciate you checking some stuff out. You might like what you see. And thank you to everyone that already likes, subscribes, notifies themselves, shares links on Twitter, and watches all the videos. I really appreciate all of you. And on that note, check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for geek news and more. My awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, I have the power!